couple of weeks, we've been talking about what it means to have a disciple-making relationship and some key ingredients that go into that. The first being relational vulnerability, and then last week we talked about the centrality of truth. Today we're going to talk about a third key ingredient in a disciple-making relationship, and that's mutual accountability. Mutual accountability is something that's very key in any deep relationship that we have with people, but especially if we're going to be talking about a discipleship relationship. What it means to give mutual accountability is that we give authority to other people to hold us accountable to mutually agreeable standards. I mentioned Proverbs 27:17 last week. It says, "As iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another." So let's break down this definition that I just gave of mutual accountability. First of all, there's that word authority. We give other people authority. What does that mean? Well, we give them the power to influence our thought, our opinion, and our behavior. We give someone that power to influence us. Now, the truth is, we do that quite often, sometimes without even knowing it. It can be called peer pressure, blind obedience, even idol worship. But it's people who influence our thoughts, our opinions, and especially our behavior. And even though we wouldn't say we give them that permission or that authority, we really do, because we use them as kind of the model for our lives. In a discipleship relationship, though, we give a person this power, this authority, for several reasons. First of all, we have observed in their life a pattern we want to follow. In other words, as they're following Jesus, we see that as a pattern of how we want to follow Jesus. Again, that takes us back to 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 1, which is kind of our model, our theme verse for our discipleship ministry. And so as we give somebody that authority, we do so because there's a pattern in their life that we see that we want to follow. Secondly, we see the vulnerability and honesty that they display. They're not perfect. Now, we know that, but it's really special when we can see somebody who is vulnerable enough to say they're not perfect and who's willing to let you in on those areas of their life where they're still growing, they're still struggling, they're still trying to figure it out. Thirdly, we give them this authority because we see they're searching for truth. Again, they haven't figured out everything about the Bible, just as we haven't. And so we see them struggling and sometimes searching for that centrality of truth that we talked about last week. And we can join them as they're in this search. And then lastly, we give them power because, frankly, we trust them. We are in some type of relationship with them where we've been able to say, I can trust that person. I can trust that they're going to help me. I can trust that we can do this together. I can trust that if I tell them something and it's not supposed to be told, they're not going to tell it. So we're giving the power, the authority, for another person to influence us spiritually as we're growing in our faith. That's the key. We're giving them the power to influence us spiritually. So let's go to that second word that's in that definition, the word accountable. I mean, we're talking about mutual accountability, so accountable should be in there. What does it mean to be accountable? Well, it means that we're willing to explain who we are, what we do, why we do it, to someone that we give permission, again, to influence us. Now, it's not just a dialogue about what we do, but the why and its effects on our lives, maybe its effects on other people's lives. In other words, I'm willing to open myself to letting another person know the real me. And that's something we don't do very well in our society. We try to hide and we try to mask and we try to make people think we're a whole lot better than who we really are. But to be accountable means I'm going to let you see the real me. And it might not be pretty at times. And it might be very confusing at times. But I'm going to let you see who I am and be accountable to you. I give permission for another person to explore my thoughts, opinions, and behaviors, to get to the truth of what I'm thinking, why I'm thinking it, to help me know the basis for my opinions. Is it the basis of truth? Is it the basis of the Bible? Is it the basis of culture? Whatever it is. And I give them permission to question if my behavior supports what I think or believe, or if it contradicts it. Accountability can be uncomfortable, but it's something we need if we're going to really allow somebody to know who we are and to help us process in this idea of being a disciple. Now, accountability can take two forms. Firstly, encouragement and affirmation. It's like a cheerleader rooting us on. Somebody who lets us know and helps us to understand and encourages us in the truth that we are learning. They cheer us on when we make those positive changes that help us to adjust to the truth that we've learned. And they thank us and congratulate us sometimes for the behavior that stems from those adjustments. Now, this is the pleasant aspect of accountability. And usually those are joyful times. But accountability also takes another twist: rebuke and challenge. We give a person the permission to call us when we refuse to learn, when we just don't want to do it. We give them permission to challenge us when we are comfortable with the changes that need to be made. And let's face it, most of us don't like to change, and it is uncomfortable. But we give that person the permission to challenge us and say, no, if you're going to live this truth out, here's what you need to do to change. We give them the permission to challenge our behaviors when they don't match up to the truth that we know and the changes we need to make. This is the unpleasant aspect, but it determines the depth of the discipling relationship. Many of us like to be encouraged and affirmed, but a real authentic relationship allows the rebuke and challenge. And that takes us to the third part of this definition on mutual accountability, is that we agree to mutually agreeable standards. Now, what are we talking about here? Obviously, it's the biblical commands and principles that we read. But it's more than that. It's how do we apply those commands and principles in our everyday life. Let me give you a couple of quick examples of this in my personal life many years ago when I was a teenager. I had just become a Christian, really dedicating my life to Christ at the age of 14 and getting serious about following Jesus. At that time, I was entering into that wonderful world of being a teenager and dating and thinking more about girls and all that. And of course, in high school, there was the always popular high school dances. Now, I wasn't much of a dancer, but I felt like, hey, this would be a fun thing to do. There was a girl that I was wanting to take, so I invited her and we went. And as we were at the dance and everybody was having fun, I just felt deeply inside me that God said, you don't need to be here. I don't think it had anything to do with the dancing, but it was God's command to me. It was the standard that He wanted me to live by at that time in my life. So I didn't go to dances. Another time was, again, a girl that I was dating, a really nice girl, very good looking, sweet as she could be. Her name was Susie. Susie was Jewish. And as we were in this very casual dating relationship, we weren't serious or anything, we just enjoyed being together. I was reading the Bible one day, and I read in 2 Corinthians where we're not supposed to be yoked unequally with unbelievers. And immediately, the Holy Spirit said, you don't need to date Susie. She's not a Christian. She's not a follower. So I had to make that choice. And that was a standard, again, that God spoke in my heart and life. Now, all of us probably can think of times or moments where God, the Holy Spirit, the Bible, in a message, in a lesson, in a class, felt, oh, that's God speaking to me. So when we talk about these mutually agreed biblical standards, they become personal standards based off biblical standards. In the Lord's Prayer, it says, lead us not into temptation, which really means, Lord, help me to know that there's some places I don't need to go. There's some things I don't need to do. And there's some people I don't need to be around. Mutual accountability is being honest with another person about the temptations you struggle with and giving them permission to ask you the tough questions about them and to help you find ways to resist them. Then, following up on living those ways out. So this discipling relationship that we've talked about with these three key ingredients, I have a question for you. Do you have a relationship like that currently? Do you have somebody in your life where you're relationally vulnerable with? Do you have somebody in your life where you seek the centrality of truth with? Do you have somebody in your life who keeps you accountable? If you do, you might already be in a discipling relationship with someone. You've just never thought of it that way. But if you're not, are you willing to enter in this kind of relationship? That's what our discipling ministry is all about. Helping you find, helping you develop, and hopefully making you committed to this type of relationship. Now, next week, we'll talk a little bit more about how to do it and some of the things that go into that. So I hope you're ready for it. God bless.